Dear Excellencies, dear guests, dear colleagues, dear ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to have you here today for our fourth panel here at this year's DASICON. Since we're a bit short on time, I'll try to keep up with the time, but in general, maybe a quick introduction. My name is Benjamin Frormann. I'm a MICE 1 student here at the Diplomatic Academy, and it's a great pleasure to host this panel today on digital trade and economic diplomacy. Maybe just for a quick relevance, what is the relevance of these topics? You know, we live in a very dynamic world where technology changes the way we live, interact, and also how we trade with one another. So in this dynamic environment, it's very important to keep track with the developments which we're currently facing, and that's also why it's a great pleasure to have our great speakers here today, and so we can shed some light on the different areas which our economy interconnected with all different countries in the world have. Next up, I would like to give you a quick introduction of our speakers today, and then we will continue with the intro statements. I will just go from right to left. Gentleman to my left is Gaurav Gandhi. He has, for 19 years, he is working with Tata Consultancy Services, which is one of the top 3 IT service companies in the world. In his latest role, he was responsible for strategic engagement and partnerships between the company and Indian as worldwide universities to foster collaboration and partnerships. Thank you very much for being here. To his left, we have Christian Rau. Since 2022, he is the Senior Vice President for Crypto and FinTech Enablement at MasterCard here in Europe. Before that, he was responsible for the introduction of the debit MasterCard in Germany and Switzerland, and he holds a master's degree from Hong Kong University as well as the University of Maastricht. Welcome. Then we will continue with Mr. Florian Frauscher. He is the Director General at the Federal Ministry of Labor and Economy, where he is responsible for innovation and internationalization, and he holds a master's degree of legal studies as well as economy. Welcome. Last but not least, we have Igor Sikadi. He is Director General for International Affairs and Markets at the Federation of Austrian Industries, the Industriellen Vereinigung, where he focuses on trade policy, transatlantic relations, as well as Central and Eastern European markets. He holds a politics degree at the University of Vienna, and he is also, and that's very, very cool, is an alumnus of the Diplomatic Academy. Welcome. I would like now you, dear speakers, to start with your intro statements, and whoever would like to go first, please be my guest.
Thank you, Benjamin, for that introduction and for the invitation to this esteemed panel. Digital trade and economic diplomacy is a very important topic in today's context. I was doing some research and I found that for any layman here, how do you define digital trade? So as per EU Commission, an e-commerce which is enabled by electronic means, which is telecommunication or information communication technology, and which covers trade in goods and services, is defined as digital trade. And digital trade principles primarily cover digital governance, which is free flow of data, which includes open data, as well as digital trade facilities, which is you have electronic authentication, you have electronic signatures, you have electronic trades, which is all possible today. And the technology has moved so fast that there has to be regulations around this, and that is what is an important topic which we may deliberate today. So that's from my side.
So thanks for having me also. And when I saw the title economic diplomacy, I was really thinking, how do I qualify? So as a German, I went to university in the Netherlands. Maybe that gives me an angle. And then I was also general manager for MasterCard here in Vienna for 3 years. So as a German in Austria was also something where I said, okay, you need to be diplomatic maybe sometimes more than at home. Our perspective from MasterCard is the world is increasingly digitizing, and therefore physical boundaries are decreasing. And we see that in our daily behavior, We don't buy music CDs anymore. I think for decades, most of the people here in the room, I guess, never touched a CD. We don't even download MP3s anymore. We just subscribe to Spotify or Deezer. We don't rent DVDs anymore. We use Netflix typically. We wouldn't call a cab, but we call an Uber. All of these things are increasingly digitizing our everyday life and also our payment behavior, because if you consume these services like Spotify, Netflix, Uber, or Just Eat, these kind of things, you typically don't pay. You put your card once in there and then it works. And that's what MasterCard and our partners are doing. We're globally facilitating these transactions. Just to give you a feeling, we have 3 billion cards out there and 100 million physical acceptance locations, and we process 9 trillion in volume every year. That's, I think, 15 times Austrian GDP, or more than 2 times German GDP. And all of this only works because of global interoperability. And our job is literally, as an industry, to make the world a small place. So every person from Mongolia can buy anything in a Peruvian e-com shop, and it will work. And I think that's what we see, that global boundaries, ideally, keep being reduced, but global interoperability is increasing. But obviously, if you look at economic diplomacy, and I'm here as sort of a representative of a company that's often called American, we would, I think, prefer to call ourselves multinational, because we have offices in 80 countries. Our CEO is a German, so I think we have a very international DNA. But yesterday I was at a panel in Frankfurt on the digital euro, and then I think you really feel how economic diplomacy, really affects my life. Because on the one hand, you have discussions around the role of the Americans, where I think somebody yesterday said the role of NATO was to keep the Americans in, the Russians out, and the Germans small. And on the other hand, when it comes to digital payments, you would rather see international companies, global American companies, be removed from the value chain to a certain extent. And I think that makes the place where I work at this point very exciting, and therefore happy to be here.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Nice to having me. Maybe I would like to start with some numbers regarding trade and regarding trade in Austria. As you know, Austria is a really export-oriented country. We are among the world's top 10 exporters when it comes per capita terms. We have around 1/3 of all our goods and services that are produced in Austria are sold abroad, and we have around 1.2 million jobs that depend on the export industry in Austria. So, nevertheless, we have sometimes a little bit critical mood in Austria when it comes to trade, and especially when it comes to free trade agreements. So I think that could be something that we should discuss about it. At the same time, we have at the moment 2 mega trends that are driving economy. One is sustainability, where Austria is, I think, really, really good. We have a lot of world market leaders in green tech sector. And the second main driver is digitalization. And also in digitalization in Austria, but not only in Austria, also in Germany and quite other countries in Europe, there's a little bit of skepticism. If we have a discussion about AI, the first thing what comes up in Europe or in Austria, it's how many jobs we will lose because of AI, and not what opportunities we have. So maybe we should today also discuss a little bit that, how we can move the discussion from this skepticism to opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. First and foremost, thank you for having me here. Thank you for the invitation. It's always good to be back here in these halls. Though my time time studying here is quite a while ago, but some things didn't change. For example, the quality of the DASICON and the discussions here. Now, with regard to the issue at hand, some of the numbers Mr. Frauscher has already mentioned. Austria is very highly dependent on trade. I would like to add not only Austria is, but all of Europe is. If we have a look at the European level, there are 38 million jobs within the EU which depend on EU exports to third countries. So this is only the exports which are exported to third countries, not what happens within the single market. And out of these 38 million jobs EU-wide, there is also roughly 800,000 jobs in Austria, which depends solely on EU exports to third countries. So not only Austrian exports to third countries, but also German exports, Italian exports, and so on to third countries where Austrian businesses are interlinked. Which also hints at the importance of today's discussion. So it's not only important to have good economic relations when it comes to economic diplomacy, but also trade barriers and tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers within the single market, but especially to third countries and the rest of the world, because we shouldn't forget Europe is roughly 6% of world's population, and we need to deal and trade with the rest. Especially. Now, with regard to the topic of digital trade, it is becoming more and more important, and some of the previous speakers have already mentioned it, that digitalization covers all fields of everyday life, of business, and so does with trade. Just to give you one figure, Austria is specifically strong when it comes to services. So Austria has for decades had traditionally a trade deficit when it comes to goods, but always a large trade surplus, in English, when it comes to services. So exports and imports of services and trade in services is very important for Austria, and the trade in digital services worldwide has quadrupled since 2005. So this shows that digitalization, trade in services has gained in importance, and Austria is, as well as Europe, is benefiting from that. There are certain measures that we would like to see implemented as a Federation of Industries where we feel that Austria and Europe could both benefit more. The term trade agreements has already been mentioned, but I think we will discuss the necessary measures and tools in the upcoming rounds. So once again, thank you for having me, and thank you for the invitation.
Perfect, thank you very much. I would like to follow up with you, Mr. Rau. You've said that, I think, how many cards did you say were distributed by MasterCard already, and the trillions of payments which are now being processed by MasterCard?
It's 3 billion cards, and we process 9 trillion of volumes per annum. Yes.
So these are already huge numbers, but we can still see that this is the process of digitalization is far from being over. So how would you see the future of digital payments continuing, and how will they shape global trade?
I think it's really hard to say, because it very much depends on where you are in the world. There's parts of Europe that are essentially cashless. If you look at Sweden, for example, that basically is in an economy that doesn't work with cash anymore. If you look at the UK, you're at a similar point. If you look at Austria is a very cash-loving country, to the extent that I think there's discussions of having cash, being fundamentally embedded in the constitution and these kind of things. Germany is sitting somewhere in between. And then, of course, you have these global rising economies like China, where, as you mentioned, I went to university in Hong Kong, and then it was, you had credit cards, but it was very largely cash-driven still. And then 15 years fast forward, they essentially leapfrogged cards, and now it's all WeChat Pay, Alipay. If you look at India, like the biggest democracy in the world, and we just discussed, you were living in Mumbai up until recently, right? Where you have a digital payment scheme based on a biometric identity, so I think it's really hard to say where the world is going, because the world is such a heterogeneous place, while we still try to have that global interoperability. But I think what one needs to recognize is, or to be very clear on, it's not that companies such as MasterCard or Alipay or WeChat Pay are against cash. To the contrary, right? It's not our job to be normative or prescriptive in how people basically make their payments, because payments don't really matter to people. People want to shop, people want to consume things, they want to split a bill, and payment should be a very sort of easy afterthought. It's really how we change our lives, where then payment or cash-based payments typically doesn't work anymore. And I think this will continue. And I like I said, I was in Vienna as a country manager for MasterCard during the pandemic. And it was really, really interesting to see, just to give you some numbers. Typically, the strongest day for MasterCard in Austria would be the last Saturday before Christmas, because that's where everybody goes to the stationary retail, buys their stuff. But then the highest day ever, and that might have changed over the last 3-4 years after the pandemic, was the last day before the first lockdown in March, when people really stocked up on vegetables or groceries and stuff. And then we really saw when the DIY stores were allowed to open up in May again, and people realized, okay, I can't go on annual leave, I can't go to Spain, to Italy, whatever, but the garden looks like shit. So everybody went to Obi, to buy stuff to polish up the house and everything. So we really saw how the economy as such is shaping payments. So I would feel very uncomfortable giving you a clear direction, but I can say digital is not going to go away. That is for sure. I think also AI and these things are not going to go away. It's super important to embed these in regulatory environments that sort of harness it and make sure it works for the society at large. But I think these things are here to stay. And I'm looking now after what we do in crypto, and I can say there's amazing things happening. There's so much opportunity. It's early stage. A lot of things are still not where we want them to be. But the train has left the station.
Perfect, thank you very much. The next question would be for you, Mr. Gandhi. Like I've mentioned from your CV, you've been responsible for strategic partnerships between universities and Tata. Could you please elaborate a bit, since we're also at a university, so what is so important about these partnerships and how can both benefit from it?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. Just to give you a context, the group I worked in India, the Tata Group, is one of the biggest conglomerates in India. It is 150-year-old group, started in 1868. Today has 100+ companies, which are operating in 100+ countries with probably 1 million+ employees, with a market cap of 300 billion and the revenue of 150 billion last year. So that's the context, and that's where, because they are into different fields, right from IT software to steel to automotive, and one of the biggest players in India in all those markets, they have to do research to stay ahead of the game. Few of the examples which I'll give, for example, TCS, Tata Consultancy Services, they had a 10-year-old research project with Singapore Management University. One of the challenge in the world, and especially in developed countries, is the aging. How do you take care of your aging population? Because you don't have manpower to do that. You have to have technology, and mostly non-intrusive technology, which is sensor-based, so that if someone is there at home and maybe your parent, and you want to see if they are doing well, they're taking that medicine, they're doing exercise, they're doing fine, how do you do that? So that's the research we did with Singapore Management University, which developed in a product which we are trying to see if we can offer to the developed world. So that's one of the example. The other example was we worked with Stanford, which was about data privacy. So it finally got into a product which TCS developed, which is Mastercraft, which is being now offered to many companies as our end client. So there are a number of examples where we worked with university. There were examples about genomic research, but there were also examples about how do you develop the skills for younger people so they are employable. That's a big challenge in developing world, but that is also a research which we did with a couple of universities. So there's a big opportunity for universities to collaborate with companies like these because of the scale which they operate, and research can be brought to market and commercialized for the greater good.
Perfect, thank you very much. Now, Mr. Frauscher, you've told us some important figures when it comes to Austrian exports. Could you please elaborate a bit on the strategies that the Austrian government is actually taking to facilitate that these numbers will probably go up, or at least what's the strategy for the future in that sense?
So I think it's important that Austria, as a small country, is looking on the strengths that we have. And there are some strengths where we are very good. One is industry. I mentioned green tech, and there are a lot of others. But we are also really good, for example, in R&D. We have the third highest R&D quota in European Union. And we are, for example, also quite good in R&D in digitalization. We have the godfather of AI in Austria. It's Sepp Hochreiter. Actually, he's Bavarian, but he has done most of his research in Austria. And he invented the large language models, where now Siri and Alexa is running on, and where also it's the basic for AI. Where we have a challenge is to monetize this R&D, because we see that we are quite good in R&D, but then the products, the services are invented or produced elsewhere, and not in Austria and not in Europe. We see that then becoming in US, in China, also in India. I just came back on Saturday from India, and we have been in Bangalore, where you have it's the Silicon Valley of India, and there are a lot of IT experts, and we see also there is going on a lot, and for example, maybe a lot of you using George from Erste Bank online banking. It was developed in India, and there we see that we have on the one hand really good researchers here in Austria, but then the development of the products are not done in Europe and in Austria. So here we have to catch up, I think. He has to do a lot. And what we can do, I think, of course, one thing that Europe is already doing is regulations. There we are really good. And that's not always only a bad thing. The Data Act, the AI Act, it's a good thing because you need some regulations also for AI, also for digitalization. But maybe we look too much only on this part, and we do not look on the other part where we have also the opportunities for business. They're coming on a lot of more things. We are also really good in quantum research, not only now because we have the Nobel Prize in the sector. We have really good startups also here in quantum technologies. And it will be the next challenge also then to have here the quantum computers, to have the service here for quantum technologies. And I think if we manage this, then maybe the next, I don't know, Apple, the next Meta, or you call it, could become also from Austria.
So we'll definitely hope for that. Maybe since you, Mr. Frauscher, represent the Austrian government, I would like to ask you, Mr. Zekadian, also then for the whole group, if we now have a look at the balance between innovation and technical progress, between companies, and what role should the government play in your opinion? And please, this question then for all of you.
Well, the term regulation has been mentioned. In some cases, this is necessary and good, but there is this stereotype, which partly may be corrected. In Europe, we like to regulate, whereas in other parts of the world, in Asia, in the US, it's more they like to innovate. To some degree, regulation is obviously necessary and a good thing, but I think it's also important to keep it in certain boundaries, let's put it this way, and to see when you look at digital transformation, green and digital transformation, because we always see that intertwined, and innovation. I think first and foremost, and this is something Mr. Frauscher also slightly mentioned, it's important to see the opportunities and not always a potential threat. And therefore, yes, in some cases regulation is necessary, but it needs to be kept in, in line, to put it this way. What other things we could do? Obviously, it's of vital importance to Europe to not only talking about trade, but to invest in research and innovation, because this is, to be perfectly frank, the future. When you look at production, when you look at exports, when you look at the goals we have obliged ourselves to in Europe when it comes to CO2 emissions and everything, this is the future. So what could the Austrian government do is one flip side of the coin, but also what could the European Union do? Because we always like to think very European in this context, because Austria is very much interlinked into European chains of value added. Well, I represent the industry, so I can say that. I think roughly 40% of the budget of the European Union is spent on agriculture, whereas agriculture represents 1.5% of Austria's and roughly the same European GDP. So from our point of view, it would be at least worth considering or discussing which part of this budget could be spent on future technologies where other parts of the world are surpassing us, be it not only China and India. India was already mentioned, the US obviously, and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, to sum it up, when it comes to innovation, but also all other fields, yes, it's important to invest in and to foster future technologies. But what we should avoid from our point of view at the end of the day is some kind of subsidy race where basically every region in the world, and we have the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, which partly aims at these issues, at green tech. We have the Green Deal in Europe. China mostly does stuff with state money. So I think what we should avoid at the end of the day is some kind of subsidy race all across the world, because at the end of the day we will all pay just to be compatible between each other, and someone, potentially the next generation, has to pay that then back. So we should all focus on well, that's more of a cliche, but market economy, and strike a, let's say, healthy balance between fostering and subsidizing and also letting the innovation thrive by itself. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Frauscher. Do you agree?
Actually, yes. I think the best way for trade would be that we have common rules that work and everyone sticks to these rules. It was then everyone would be better off. The problem is that at the moment this does not happen because, as you mentioned, US and also China are working a lot with subsidies, and that makes it quite difficult then for companies in Europe to produce here and tend to sell their products on the world market. There are a lot of examples for that. when it comes to digitalization, one of the most important products are semiconductors. We need them for everything, and we know that really a lot of those semiconductors are coming from Asia, and it's not only an economic question, or a political question, how to deal with it. And I think it's quite a good development now that also the European Union started with the European Chip Act, where the aim is to have in 2030 20% of the worldwide production of semiconductors in Europe. At the moment we are 10%, so that's quite challenging goal. But we are on a good way, and a lot of people do not know that Austria plays here a really important role. We are the fourth biggest semiconductor producer in Europe in absolute terms, and in relative terms we are number one. 20% of the worldwide energy efficiency semiconductors coming from Austria. A lot of cybersecurity semiconductors coming from Austria. If you look at your passport, the chip in your passport is coming from Austria. 90% of all chips from passports coming from Austria. So we are here on a good way. Also the Austrian government is investing here 3 billion euros now in the semiconductor ecosystem. That's a lot of money, and we hope that also then we're sure that then the investments will also follow. And of course it would be better if we don't need the subsidies, but at the moment as the other big regions also work with that, there's no other possibilities. And at the moment there are the discussions in Abu Dhabi from the World Trade Organization. This is the institution where the rules are made, and the rules should be followed. Yeah, we will see if there will be some developments that maybe also the other regions come back and stick to the rules that are in place.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Rau. What is your perspective as a payment service provider?
I mean, obviously regulation is important in financial services. I mean, we've seen what happens in 2007, 2008, 2009 if regulation fails. And as per Florian, I think Europe is in many aspects at the forefront of regulation. And typically regulation has that negative connotation. But if we look at GDPR, Datenschutzgrundverordnung, if we look at open banking regulation, if we look now at crypto, there's such a thing as called MiCA, market and crypto asset regulation, that is upcoming. So Europe really is at the forefront when it comes to providing regulation for emerging technologies, AI you also mentioned. And I think it is important to strike the right balance between innovation and curtailing the potentially negative effects. So we would call that, you know, it needs to be a level playing field, right? Everybody needs to have the same chance to compete. State-near actors shouldn't enjoy an unfair competitive advantage, obviously. And I think if you put the rails out there and then put the trains, or you put the roads out there as a state, and then you let the private sector put the cars on there, I think that typically works quite well, this public-private partnership. So having said that, regulation is important. It shouldn't discriminate. It shouldn't dampen innovation, but it should encourage the private sector to do sustainable and responsible innovation.
Perfect, thank you very much. And now, last but not least, Mr. Gandhi.
Thank you. So I'll bring some perspective from a developing country like India. One of the big things, and of course Christian would knew, is which came out of India in the last few years in financial space is UPI. To give you a context, in 2016-17 when UPI was developed, it was estimated that India would take 46 years to get its population under financial inclusion. So more than, say, 60-70% population was not having a formal bank account or a credit score and so on. And when this happened today with UPI and Aadhaar and the India stack, digital stack, that 46 years basically got shrink to couple of years, 6, 7 years. Now 80% of Indian population today is under financial inclusion, which means they have a bank record, they can get loan, and they can get money digitally. And that happened by leapfrogging the technology which we were discussing here. So UPI today, a normal tea seller in India, which sells its tea for 25 cents and sells 500 teas in a day, today doesn't have to manage cash, and probably Mr. Frauscher would have seen that when in Bangalore and Delhi, how people are using UPI, using QR code. It does the transfer of around $100 billion in a year. That's a transaction which is happening on UPI, and it is a government-private partnership, one of the best examples which came out of India. Now, to give you a perspective, there are a lot of countries which are interested to use this technology, which is open source. One of them is France. So today, if you go to Eiffel Tower, an Indian tourist can pay through UPI and get a ticket and get to the top of the Eiffel Tower, because Indians are number 2 in terms of number of tourists which visit Eiffel Tower. So there are countries like Mauritius, there are countries like France. In fact, Greece yesterday signed an agreement with India in order to use UPI for the remittance. Remittance is a big number in India. To give you a context, India gets remittance of $125 billion a year, which is the top in the world. And to get it through a formal channel is difficult because it's also pricey and complicated. So the government is now introducing the new UPI regulation in a couple of countries. Eurobank in Greece just signed that agreement so that now Indian residents in Greece can transfer that money very quickly and with a very low cost. So these are some of the things which I want to point from a developing world where public-private partnership can play a great role for leapfrogging to the next generation.
Perfect. Yes, please go ahead.
If you allow me to comment, and I can, beat your drum, because UPI is obviously not a MasterCard product. But if you think about the fact that you managed to move basically 1.4 billion people into the financial inclusion scenario in 6 years, and just to put it in perspective, in Europe, the digital euro research started 2 years ago. Now we're in the exploratory phase, and I think in 2029 there is supposed to be the first product out there. So that's 8 years to put the first product out there. And I think having this, where does Europe reside in this global context, I think that gives you a feeling, right? And if you take into account how much economic growth potential is unleashed by pulling in 1.4 billion people in a financial inclusion scenario where they can build up capital, where they can safely interact, where they can walk home from the market without fear of being robbed because the money is digitally sort of safe, right? So I think that's where I see sometimes, and again, it's not a MasterCard thing, right? Where I see that Europe is maybe overthinking, over-discussing things rather than just giving it a shot, right?
Thank you very much. I'm terribly sorry, but we're kind of running out of time. So now we would move to the questions of the audience. And I can see 1, 2, 3 hands up. Please keep the questions rather short, but I think we should manage.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I would have a question probably to the biggest revolution of the digital, let's say, space after the internet. Also, the pioneers of the internet told this. There was an internet, but there was not a missing of sound digital money, which was created as a Bitcoin, let's say, 12 years ago. Unfortunately, I didn't hear very much to that, but getting to the question, having a little bit short, there is I would say, over-regulation of this space. There was an article of Jürgen Schlaf and Mr. Beiser from the ECB, from the European Central Bank, basically demonizing this Bitcoin and, let's say, sound money, and also another steps. You have certain fanatic groups in the European Parliament wanting to prohibit it and so on. So it's basically this, and this is coming from the high post of the European Central Bank, which is actually a big danger for Europe to, stay at the station and the train missing the train and basically missing this big digital revolution of all the times. Don't you see actually, so here to the question, over-regulation in this space? in particular? Thank you very much.
I can speak to that because I look after crypto for MasterCard, and I think Bitcoin in its current shape and form is not suitable for consumer payments. So it doesn't work for you to go to Hofar to make this transaction because it takes roughly €1, give or take, for a transaction, and it takes 10 minutes for the transaction to be sort of immutable. So that's one point. But Bitcoin was only the sort of the first thing that started 15 years ago. Now we're looking at stable coins and CBDCs, so-called central bank digital currencies, such as the digital euro. And I think it would be really difficult to untangle all what you were saying, but I'm fully with you that the technology and the inherent possibilities are huge. It's gonna come, but it needs to be regulated in the right way because you don't wanna have an FTX, you don't wanna have a Binance moment and therefore I'm fully with you. The technology is there to stay, but it needs to be used and deployed by the right organizations in the right way.
Hi, my name is Caroline. I'm a student at the DA, and my question is for Mr. Frauscher. You mentioned at the beginning how Austrians seem to be afraid of AI and digital technology in general, and you said we should view it as opportunities more than a threat. So what exactly are those opportunities?
Yeah, I think it's not only Austria. We have also in whole Europe. There's a term in English often used. That's German Angst, and that describes it quite well. So we are always quite okay. Let's see before we go into it, and maybe to regulate before we get into it. It's not always bad, but of course I think we have to see more the opportunities. What are these opportunities? As also Igor said in the beginning, Austria and Europe is an export-oriented country. We are just too small to live from just the Austrian market or the European market. So we have to go abroad, we have to sell our products all over the world. And I'm totally in that. I think if everyone do trade, the world is better off. And I think you mentioned also India and also in China. We managed to bring their millions of people out of poverty in the last decade just because of trade. And I think that's the important thing. And when it comes to digitalization, all the things we discussed today, and all what we do every day, there is so much benefit from it that I think also it would be good to see also there the opportunities and the chances that we have. It's not the right way to say, okay, everything is good and everything is fine. Of course, we have to look at what is going on with maybe some jobs when it comes to digitalization and AI, how they change with the time. But I think that's the important thing. We do not will lose all the jobs, but jobs will change. And what we need also from a perspective as a government to go with this change. One thing is we need skills for all the people. We need inclusion so that no one left behind with that. Elderly people, for example, it's important also to bring skills to them. And then I think in the end, everyone will be better off in the end.
Hi everyone, I'm Fathia, also from the DA, and my question is also directed to Mr. Frauscher. With your background in legal studies and economics, how do you assess or see the evolution of Austria's legal and economic frameworks towards supporting the digital economy and also attracting foreign investments? And also, what priorities are being set in terms of attracting these foreign investments as well?
I think first we have always to look at the European perspective, because it's really important that we look at the single market. We this week celebrating 30 years of European single market, and therefore it's always important if we look to what laws coming on, which regulations coming on, that we have those on a European level and not only on a Austrian level. Second, I think, is that, as I mentioned before, we have to look at those strengths that we have in Austria, like semiconductors, but there are a lot of others. It's life science, for example, in Austria, it's industry, it's automatization. So, as a small country, we cannot do in every sector be the best, but we should really focus on some areas that I think are quite important. And then I think it's important to invest in R&D, because in the end we will never be competitiveness with the price on a global market, but it's with quality and technology, and so we should, I think, focus on that.
Perfect, thank you very much. Yeah, if you just, microphone. One last question, please.
All right, my name is Mogus. I'm also from the Diplomatic Academy, and I will keep my questions very short. The first one is, speaking of regulation or over-regulation, I think one of the challenge, and that also works within the context of Europe, is it's not only digital transformation and evolution, but there is revolution. So whenever there is revolution or revolutionary idea, it has never went well in history. So there is a revolutionary aspect to digitalization, and of course there must be regulation or some form of framework. And how would you see it from the revolutionary spirit which underpins digitalization? It could be to any one of my question is. And when it comes to AI, what about the lack of agency? Not only losing jobs, but with AI, it is taking away human agency to make decisions in everyday policies. So that's my question. Thank you.
Perfect. Who would like to answer these?
I can start maybe, and then
maybe
you
jumps
on.
in.
When it comes to a revolution, I think we've seen that also in history with technologies. Normally, we overrate the influence of technologies in the short term, and we underrate it in the long term. So it's not really a revolution in the end; it's an evolution. And I think when it comes to technology, normally it's evolution in the right direction, and it's good. And for the second issue, I mentioned also before already that I think it is important to have also some measures implemented when it comes to AI. We see that there are a lot of opportunities. There is also some threats, of course. But if there are enough skills that the people have, then they can work with that. And we have now been talking for some years about the twin transition, so the sustainable and the digital transition. This is now moving to a triple transition, where we also say we have sustainability, we have digitalization, but we have to put the human in the center. And I think that's a good approach for that.
Perfect. And I think these final remarks are perfect for the topic. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for your participation, and Mahlzeit.